My boss fired me at 50 for being too old. His company collapsed after my secret call. The fluorescent lights of Rex Alden's corner office cast a harsh, unforgiving glow on the polished mahogany table between us. It was a scene I had anticipated for months, a culmination of 2 years of watching a corporate predator dismantle everything I had helped build. Rex leaned back in his ergonomic chair, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips, the kind that always betrayed a deep-seated insecurity masked by outward bravado. His freshly pressed suit seemed to practically hum with an aggressive youthfulness, a stark contrast to my own quiet, well-worn competence. He had just finished explaining, in overly rehearsed corporate jargon, why my services were no longer required. "Silas," he'd begun, his voice dripping with an insincere empathy that made my stomach churn. "We're moving in a new direction. A younger, more agile direction. Your contributions have been invaluable, truly. But at 50, well, the pace of innovation, you understand." My mind registered the words, each one a calculated insult, a dismissal of a quarter-century of my life poured into the very foundations of this company. 25 years. A lifetime for some, a blink for the universe. I remembered starting here, fresh out of university, drawn not by the promise of quick riches, but by the raw, untamed potential of technology, the thrill of building something truly new from scratch. I wasn't the flashy one, the charismatic visionary who captivated rooms with grand pronouncements. I was the architect, the meticulous engineer, the one who painstakingly translated abstract concepts into tangible, revolutionary products. My role as head of product innovation wasn't just a title. It was a testament to decades spent in the trenches, wrestling with complex algorithms, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible in our sector. I lived and breathed the technology, understanding its nuances, its vulnerabilities, its boundless potential. I was the silent engine that powered Innovate Core's rise from a garage startup to a global powerhouse. I was the one who pulled all-nighters, celebrated small breakthroughs, and weathered countless failures, learning equally from both. When Rex talked about agility and pace, he had no idea of the quiet, relentless pace I had maintained for decades, the deep roots I had laid. Yet, as he spoke, I found myself observing him, not with anger, but with a detached curiosity. His eyes, the trying to project authority, darted, betraying a nervousness beneath the veneer of confidence. He expected an outburst, a plea, perhaps even tears. He had probably rehearsed how to handle my emotional breakdown. What he saw instead was a calm, almost serene expression on my face. My hands, resting on my lap, remained steady. There was no tremor, no clenched fist, no telltale tightening of the jaw. It was as if I were listening to a weather report, rather than the pronouncement of my professional obsolescence. I was watching a poorly executed play unfold, a play where the lead actor believed he was the director, but was merely a puppet on strings he couldn't even see. "Understood, Rex," I replied, my voice even, devoid of any discernible emotion. The simplicity of my response seemed to throw him off balance. He blinked, the smirk faltering just a fraction. He had prepared for a fight, not a concession. That was his first mistake. He had always underestimated me, always seen my quiet demeanor as a sign of weakness, my methodical approach as a lack of dynamism. He mistook depth for slowness, wisdom for inertia. He believed that merely shouting louder and moving faster constituted innovation. He couldn't grasp that true innovation, the kind that lasts, is a slow, painstaking process built on solid foundations, not shifting sands. His next words, a perfunctory offer of severance and outplacement services, washed over me like irrelevant background noise. My gaze drifted past him, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, to the sprawling cityscape beyond. The very skyline seemed to be a testament to what I had helped build. This company, Innovate Core, wasn't just a name. It was the embodiment of my life's work. Its most critical, groundbreaking technologies, the ones powering its multi-billion-dollar valuation, bore the indelible stamp of my intellect, my perseverance. And Rex, in his youthful arrogance, thought he could simply cut off the head and expect the body to thrive. He believed he was severing a dead limb when, in fact, he was severing the very lifeline. He had no idea of the silent, intricate mechanisms I had woven into the fabric of this corporation, mechanisms that were about to unravel at the slightest tug. He saw a man too old, I saw a boy too naive, too obsessed with appearances to understand substance. And in that moment, as he gloated, I felt no anger, only a quiet certainty. The stage was set, and the play, though he thought he was directing it, was about to begin according to my script. The company's crown jewel, its patented Synapse AI technology, was my magnum opus. Synapse AI wasn't just another algorithm. It was the adaptive core that powered nearly 80% of Innovate Core's revenue streams, licensed to major players across various industries. It was revolutionary, dynamic, and incredibly complex. Other companies had tried to replicate it, pouring billions into research and development, but always failed. The secret wasn't just in the code. It was in the intricate, proprietary data sets, the unique training methodologies, and, more importantly, the subtle, almost intuitive understanding of its architecture that only I possessed. I had personally overseen its development from inception, navigating countless technical hurdles and legal complexities. It was my baby, painstakingly nurtured and protected. I remembered the late nights, fueled by lukewarm coffee, debugging lines of code that stretched into miles, the intense debates with my small, dedicated team, the sheer joy of seeing the first prototypes hum to life. Synapse AI was not just a product. It was a living entity, constantly evolving, requiring constant, expert care. The licensing agreement for Synapse AI was a masterpiece of strategic foresight, a safety net I had meticulously woven years ago, long before Alden was even a blip on the corporate radar. Our primary licensee, a formidable global conglomerate known as Viridian Dynamics, held the exclusive rights to use Synapse AI in numerous critical applications. This wasn't a standard, boilerplate agreement cobbled together by junior lawyers. I had insisted on specific clauses, personal guarantees, and a deeply interwoven relationship that hinged on mutual trust and my continued involvement. The legal team had questioned the necessity of such intricate personal clauses, citing corporate norms and potential future complications, but I had prevailed. I understood the fickle nature of the market, the ruthlessness of competition, and the vital importance of protecting our core asset from short-sighted leadership. I had seen companies self-destruct before, through internal power struggles or sudden shifts in strategy that ignored foundational strengths. The contract stipulated that my continued expert oversight and a specific set of parameters concerning the technology's evolution were foundational to the agreement. Should those parameters be significantly altered, or my role forcibly terminated without mutual consent and a clear succession plan approved by both parties, Viridian Dynamics reserved the unilateral right to revoke the license. It was a failsafe, a last resort against corporate malfeasance or, as it turned out, reckless incompetence. This was my secret weapon, tucked away in plain sight within a mountains of legal text, known only to a handful of high-level legal counsel at Viridian and, of course, myself. Alden swaggered into this delicate ecosystem 2 years prior, a freshly minted MBA with a penchant for buzzwords and an almost pathological aversion to anything that smelled of legacy. He saw experience as a burden, not a blessing. He climbed the corporate ladder with alarming speed, fueled by aggressive, short-term victories and a talent for self-promotion. He was a master of the quarterly earnings call, spinning narratives faster than a politician. He saw experienced employees like me not as assets, but as liabilities, overhead that hindered agility. Our deep institutional knowledge, our measured approach, our caution born from years of trial and error, he dismissed as resistance to change. He openly mocked the company's old guard, preferring to surround himself with yes-men and inexperienced protégés who would parrot his latest buzzwords. He pushed for radical, often ill-conceived innovations that were little more than superficial rebrandings of existing products, or worse, poorly implemented new features that created more problems than they solved. He wanted flash, not function. The clash was inevitable. He tried to sideline me, to diminish my department's influence, to force me into early retirement. He cut our R&D budget, redirecting funds to his pet projects, glossy marketing campaigns and superficial UI overhauls. He reassigned key engineers from my team to projects he deemed more agile or forward-looking, essentially dismantling the very team that kept Synapse AI at the cutting edge. I resisted subtly, tactfully, presenting data, outlining risks, but always with the underlying awareness of the Synapse AI clause. I knew he was building towards this moment, his ultimate declaration of authority, his final attempt to rid the company of anyone who challenged his superficial worldview. The more he pushed, the more I quietly reaffirmed the crucial ties I had built with Eleanor Vance and Viridian Dynamics, ensuring they understood my indispensable role, subtly reminding them of the conditions of our agreement. My quiet watchfulness wasn't passivity, it was the patient observation of a chess master, waiting for his opponent to make the inevitable, fatal blunder. I knew the moment he cut me out completely, he would be signing his own company's death warrant. The days following my termination unfolded with an almost surreal calm. Rex, in his boundless arrogance, believed he had simply removed an obstacle. He likely saw my quiet departure as confirmation of my supposed obsolescence, a sign that I was too old, too tired, too defeated to fight back. He wouldn't have known that my mind, far from being defeated, was simply shifting gears, moving from the reactive defense of my position to the proactive execution of a long-gestated plan. My 25 years at Innovate Core had not only given me an unparalleled understanding of its technological core, but also an intimate knowledge of its vulnerabilities and dependencies. And the most critical dependency, the one Rex so recklessly ignored, was not just the Synapse AI technology itself, but the intricate web of trust, personal relationships, and specific contractual obligations that underpinned its very existence. I spent the first few days tidying my affairs, disconnecting from the corporate email, and quietly informing a few trusted colleagues, loyal souls who had worked with me for years and shared my quiet despair over Rex's leadership. They expressed varying degrees of shock and dismay, though none dared to openly defy Rex. I offered them no explanations, no rallying cry for vengeance. My resolve was internal, a silent hum beneath the surface of my placid demeanor. I knew that Rex, eager to assert his dominance and validate his decision, would immediately try to manage the Synapse AI portfolio himself or delegate it to one of his handpicked, inexperienced protégés. This was precisely what I needed. He would undoubtedly attempt to streamline processes he didn't understand, cut corners on crucial maintenance, and modernize aspects of the technology that were, in fact, core to its stability and, more importantly, to the highly specific performance metrics outlined in the Viridian Dynamics contract. Any significant deviation, any attempt to strip away what he perceived as unnecessary complexity, would constitute a breach of the agreed-upon conditions. I had built Synapse AI with redundancies and intricate safeguards, not for show, but for robust performance. Rex, in his haste, would see these as inefficiencies to be eliminated. My former colleagues, still inside, confirmed my suspicions, discreetly sharing internal memos about upcoming optimization initiatives for core systems. They were worried for their own jobs, but also, I think, for the integrity of the technology we had all poured our lives into. The secret call wasn't a dramatic, clandestine whisper into a burner phone. It was a professional, scheduled video conference with Eleanor Vance, the head of global licensing at Viridian Dynamics. Eleanor was a shrewd negotiator, a woman of immense integrity, and someone with whom I had built a relationship of profound mutual respect over 15 years. We had weathered market shifts, legal battles, and technical challenges together. She knew the Synapse AI technology intimately, understood its intricacies, and recognized my irreplaceable contribution to its success and ongoing stability. She was a pragmatist, guided by data and facts, not corporate fluff. "Good morning, Eleanor," I had greeted her, my voice as calm as if this were just another quarterly review. "I trust you received my email regarding my recent departure from Innovate Core?" Her expression was grave, a slight furrow in her brow. "Indeed, Silas. I admit, I was quite shocked. Rex Alden informed us it was a mutual decision for a new strategic direction. But knowing you, and the critical nature of your involvement with Synapse AI, I had my doubts. My team and I have been reviewing Section 4.c with particular attention since your email. It was a decision made for me, Eleanor," I clarified, without bitterness, simply stating a fact. "And it directly impacts the clauses regarding key personnel oversight and architectural integrity as laid out in Section 4.c of our Synapse AI licensing agreement. I wanted to ensure you were fully appraised of the situation and its ramifications." I then outlined, in precise, technical detail, the changes Rex had already begun to implement or intended to implement, the budget cuts to critical research that would inevitably lead to performance degradation, the reassignment of key engineers who understood the subtle dependencies of the system, the proposed alterations to the data integration protocols that would compromise data integrity. These weren't speculative accusations. I had gathered this information discreetly from my contacts still inside the company, who were themselves growing increasingly concerned and had supplied me with undeniable evidence, terrified of the impending chaos. I spoke of the risk to Viridian's own critical systems, explaining how a seemingly minor change could ripple through the complex architecture, causing unforeseen instability. Eleanor listened, her gaze unwavering, occasionally nodding slowly, her mind clearly connecting the dots I was laying out. She understood the contract. She knew the technology. And most importantly, she knew that without my unique understanding and oversight, the Synapse AI, no matter how robust, ran the risk of becoming unstable, unpredictable, or unable to meet the stringent demands of Viridian's global operations. It was a silent, clinical execution of the ultimate safeguard. I didn't ask her to revoke the license. I simply provided the verifiable facts that triggered the contractual conditions. The decision, legally and ethically, was hers. But it was also inevitable. As I concluded, I offered my continued support in an advisory capacity, should Viridian require independent verification or consultation, a gesture that underscored my commitment to the technology itself, rather than any personal vendetta against Rex. My call was not an act of malice, it was an act of prevention, ensuring the integrity of the technology and the contractual obligations were upheld. Rex, meanwhile, continued to bask in his premature victory, entirely oblivious to the silent tremors beneath his feet, the ground already beginning to crack around him. The climax arrived with the brutal precision of a perfectly timed explosion. It was Innovate Core's quarterly earnings call, a globally webcast event designed to reassure investors and trumpet Rex Alden's transformative leadership. I watched it discreetly from my living room, a cup of herbal tea beside me, the flickering screen reflecting a faint smile playing on my lips. Rex, resplendent in a new, even more aggressively youthful suit, exuded an almost manic confidence. He spoke of record growth, of streamlined operations, and innovative new initiatives, painting a picture of a company thriving under his youthful dynamism. He even alluded, with a derisive chuckle that grated on my ears, to having shed legacy burdens, a thinly veiled jab at me, a final little victory lap he thought he was taking. Other executives, looking slightly uncomfortable and avoiding direct eye contact, offered their pre-approved soundbites, their voices lacking any genuine enthusiasm. Then, just as Rex was about to conclude his triumphant monologue, promising an even brighter quarter ahead, a sharp, insistent ping echoed through the conference room speakers, a sound usually reserved for major breaking news alerts. The professional veneer of the webcast cracked. A junior PR assistant, visibly flustered, her eyes wide with panic, rushed a tablet to Rex. His face, initially annoyed by the interruption, quickly drained of all color as he read the headline. The confident smirk vanished, replaced by a ghastly pallor. His eyes darted wildly, searching for an explanation that wasn't there, as if the words on the screen were a personal affront from the universe itself. The news headline, flashing across the financial wire services, and, for a horrifying second, visible on the giant monitor behind Rex before the PR team scrambled to shut it off, proclaimed, Viridian Dynamics revokes Innovaticor's Synapse AI license. Immediate effect. A collective gasp rippled through the virtual audience, audible even through the webcast, and the few journalists present in the physical room erupted in a cacophony of questions. Mr. Alden, is this true? What does this mean for Innovate Core's revenue? How could this happen? Rex, utterly blindsided, stammered, No, this must be a mistake. An error. His voice was high-pitched, betraying the icy grip of panic. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, stripped bare of his carefully constructed facade. His face registered not just shock, but genuine terror. He had built his entire career on superficial wins and bold pronouncements, never truly understanding the intricate gears that made the machine run. He was a paper tiger, and his paper was now burning. That's when Eleanor Vance, head of global licensing for Viridian Dynamics, appeared on a pre-recorded video statement that moments later began to circulate rapidly across major financial news networks. Her voice was calm, professional, and utterly damning, a stark contrast to Rex's unraveling. Viridian Dynamics regrets to announce the immediate revocation of the Synapse AI licensing agreement with Innovate Core, she stated, her gaze direct and unyielding. This decision was made after careful review and verification that the conditions stipulated in Section 4.c, concerning essential personnel oversight and the maintenance of core architectural integrity, have been demonstrably breached. Viridian Dynamics values stability and ethical partnership above all else. Our operations require a technology we can implicitly trust, consistently maintained by its original, knowledgeable architects. Regrettably, under the current leadership at Innovate Core, those conditions can no longer be guaranteed. She didn't name me explicitly, but the implication was glaring. I was the original, knowledgeable architect. I was the essential personnel. My absence, and Rex's subsequent modifications, had triggered the nuclear option. Rex Alden, watching it unfold live on a muted screen handed to him by a trembling assistant, looked like a man who had spontaneously combusted from the inside out. His empire, built on sand and superficiality, was crumbling before his very eyes, triggered by the very man he had so carelessly discarded, the legacy burden he had so gleefully shed. He had fired a genius, and in doing so, he had effectively signed his own company's death warrant. The silence in his office, as I had observed him earlier, had masked a profound power. Now, the silence at the earnings call, broken only by frantic whispers and flashing cameras, was the deafening roar of absolute ruin. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely predictable. Rex Alden's carefully constructed empire dissolved in a matter of days. The immediate aftermath of Eleanor Vance's announcement was a financial bloodbath. Innovate Core's stock plummeted within minutes of the news, shedding nearly 70% of its value before trading was temporarily halted by the exchange. Investors panicked, pulling out their capital like rats fleeing a sinking ship, their trust in Rex's vision completely shattered. The very next day, news broke that several major clients, who relied heavily on the licensed Synapse AI for their own critical systems, from global logistics to financial trading platforms, were initiating legal proceedings against Innovate Core for breach of contract and damages, citing the company's inability to provide a stable, fully supported product. Their reliance on Synapse AI meant their own operations were now in jeopardy, and they wanted compensation, and they wanted it fast. The dominoes, set by Rex, were falling with terrifying speed. Rex, once the darling of the financial press, became a pariah. His face, which had once graced the covers of prestigious business magazines, now featured in scathing op-eds detailing his hubris and incompetence. Analysts dissected his every move, highlighting his short-sightedness and his fatal underestimation of intellectual capital and foundational relationships. The innovations he had so loudly championed were exposed as hollow, superficial changes that did nothing to address the company's core technological needs once Synapse AI, its lifeblood, was gone. His frantic attempts to regain control, to spin the narrative, to blame unforeseen external factors, were futile. The truth, once unleashed, spread like wildfire, consuming everything in its path. My former colleagues, the ones who had watched me leave with a mixture of sympathy and fear, now contacted me in droves. Their calls and messages were filled with a blend of shock, regret, and a dawning realization of the magnitude of my quiet power. Some expressed remorse for not having spoken up, for letting Rex's toxic culture prevail. Others simply sought solace or advice, fearing for their own livelihoods as widespread layoffs began, entire departments being gutted. I offered what comfort I could, but remained detached, observing the consequences of a system that had valued fleeting youth and aggressive marketing over enduring wisdom and foundational strength. There was no joy in their suffering, merely the acknowledgement of an inevitable consequence. The company that had once seemed invincible, a titan of industry, unraveled at an astonishing pace. Bankruptcy proceedings were initiated within weeks, its assets liquidated, its name becoming a byword for corporate failure. The sleek glass and steel towers that had once symbolized Innovate Core's dominance now stood as empty monuments to corporate folly. The agile direction Rex had so eagerly pursued had led them directly off a cliff. As for Rex himself, he disappeared from public view, his reputation in tatters. The last I heard, he was facing multiple lawsuits, both from investors seeking restitution and former employees demanding compensation for lost pensions. His personal fortune, largely tied up in Innovate Core stock and options, had evaporated, leaving him facing financial ruin on top of professional disgrace. He was no longer the brash, confident CEO, he was a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of what happens when ambition overrides competence and respect for those who built the very ground you stand on. My observation of the chaos was quiet, almost academic. I felt no triumph, no gloating satisfaction. It was simply the logical conclusion of an equation I had understood far better than anyone else. The seed of collapse had been sown the moment Rex Alden dismissed the very foundation of his company, thinking it was merely an old man he could easily sweep aside. Life, as it often does, moved on, albeit with a profound shift in my own trajectory. Months turned into a year, and the dust eventually settled from the corporate earthquake that had been Innovate Core's collapse. I was no longer defined by a corporate title or the confines of a single company. Instead, I found myself in a different kind of peace, a liberation I hadn't realized I craved. My phone, once filled with internal corporate politics and endless meetings, now rang with inquiries from venture capitalists, cutting-edge tech startups, and established firms seeking my expertise. They weren't looking for someone to lead a new direction based on superficial trends or buzzwords, but for the deep, foundational knowledge, the nuanced problem-solving acumen, and the strategic foresight that comes only with decades of experience. The very qualities Rex had dismissed. I chose a new path, one less burdened by corporate hierarchies and more focused on genuine innovation. I started a boutique technology consulting firm, aptly named Thorn Analytics, specializing in complex AI architecture, strategic intellectual property management, and crisis management for companies facing similar foundational challenges. My clients were discerning, appreciative, and understood the true value of my insights. I worked on projects that genuinely excited me, collaborating with brilliant minds who revered, rather than dismissed, the wisdom of experience. My schedule was flexible, allowing me more time for the quiet pursuits I loved. Long walks in nature, delving deeper into obscure scientific journals, rekindling old passions like classical music and woodworking. My financial security was greater than ever, ironically, thanks to the very patent portfolio I had developed and the strategic foresight I had embedded within the Viridian Dynamics contract, which indirectly led to new opportunities for me as Viridian sought further independent consultation for their continued use of the robust core of the AI, now completely decoupled from the collapsed Innovate Core. My expertise, once taken for granted, was now sought after and highly valued. Rex Alden became nothing more than a footnote in business history, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms about the dangers of youthful hubris and the fatal consequences of devaluing experience. His name, once synonymous with the future and disruption, now evoked images of ruin and misplaced arrogance. He was utterly irrelevant, his grand pronouncements replaced by the silence of absence. There was no satisfaction in his downfall for me, only the quiet recognition that the natural order had been restored. The universe, in its own way, balances the scales, and sometimes, it simply waits for the arrogant to trip over their own feet. What I learned, what I hope others can glean from my story, is this. True value, true innovation, is rarely loud or flashy. It often resides in the quiet brilliance, the meticulous dedication, and the foundational knowledge built over years of unseen effort. Don't mistake calm for weakness or experience for obsolescence. The world rushes to chase the next big thing, always chasing the fleeting trend, but enduring success often hinges on the very roots that are carelessly dismissed. Respect the architects, value the deep thinkers, and understand that some secrets, some crucial connections, are woven not into lines of code, but into relationships forged over a lifetime of trust and shared purpose. The most devastating blow isn't always struck with a public declaration of war, but with a single, quiet, and perfectly timed call that reveals the truth about who truly held the keys all along.